Now we are really live on Facebook. So one of these days, I'm going to figure this out. Hey, there we go. Just got the YouTube notification. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual co-hosts and do not reflect the official policy or position of the Firearms Radio Network and or their employers. Viewer discretion is advised. This is especially true on live shows. And for those of y'all, which would be none of y'all that were watching for the past 5 minutes, we are back again today. Believe it or not, we are actually live now. Apparently the last 5 minutes of great discussion that we had was not being broadcast live. But tonight we are joined with Tim Herron of timherronshooting.com, Wade, Dr. Solomon, and myself. We were students in Tim Herron's practical performance course the weekend before last. I'm one of those defensive shooter guys that decided he was going to jump into a class with some. Wade, you're a A class or a master class shooter?
I'm A class.
A class, yeah. There's a Brandon in class was talking about you were sandbagging. I don't know what that's all about. And then Dr. Solomon, you're A class shooter, B class shooter. What classification are you?
I'm not classified in USPSA.
You're not classified
or
in
anything.
USPSA.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit about that. That's because you're one of these guys that can shoot more than just the handgun fast, right?
Yeah, I shoot 3-gun.
Shoot 3-gun.
I don't shoot any of them necessarily very well, but I try.
Exactly.
Hey man, I saw you running the handgun during class, and I would disagree with you on that. We're going to talk about a little bit about 3-gun and USPSA and why you decided to take a class with Tim Herron. Before we get into that, Tim Herron, remind our listeners, we had you on the beginning part of this year, reviewing one of your courses as well. For those folks that either missed that episode or forgotten about us, talk to our students a little bit about yourself, what you do with USPSA, and how you're making competitive shooters better at running courses and shooting their gun.
Cool. But yeah, I'm Tim Herron. I've been shooting since 2010. When I first picked up my first handgun, actually, as most people do, that they want to get proficient with a handgun as far as for self-defense and personal protection. That's kind of what got me started down this journey, and decided I liked doing this and wanted to do more of it. And fortunately, a few of the guys, I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri, and just recently kind of transplanted here to Albuquerque about a year ago this month. But guys back in Kansas City that I kind of hooked up with at the range were, fortunately for me, were kind of the non-FUD variety, kind of really knew what they were doing and how to, they also, kind of had a passion for wanting to make better, shooters better and see people improve, and kind of put me on the straight and narrow really as how to become a more proficient pistol shooter. And I kind of fell into competitive pistol shooting with USPSA about June or July of that same year in 2010, and kind of picked it up from there. And there's been no turning back. I mean, it kind of went from a kind of an interest to a hobby to a passion to, now it's not only just still a passion for me, it's also my occupation. So I left my full-time career as a 23-year veteran of automotive mechanics to become a full-time trainer about the beginning of this year. And this is what I do now full-time.
That's awesome. And I mentioned earlier, probably like 2 minutes earlier, that I was a student in this class, and signing up and taking this class. I as you all know, I come from the defensive use of handgun world, that realm. And there can oftentimes be this debate between competitive shooters and defensive shooters that, competitive shooting will get you killed in the streets. I wanted to take this class for a couple reasons. I think the main reason is I understand that if we look at who are the folks that are shooting and able to manipulate their handguns at a high level of proficiency, we'd be remiss to not look at the competitive shooting world, right? And if we look at USPSA shooters, or competitive shooters in general, right, they're able to run their handguns very efficiently. So translating that over to defensive shooting world, I wanted to get into class and see what are some things that I could do to run my defensive handgun a little bit better. So I showed up to class with my Glock 48, 4 magazines, 4 10-round mags, because most stages can't be more than 34 rounds. And I had the audacity to think that I wouldn't need more than a few makeup shots on some steel at high pace. I ran a crappy mag pouch because I don't need a mag pouch in real life. You're going to train like you fight, right? And then a Neo mag, which was going to be, in my head, that I would reload from the pocket, the Neo mag first, because I wanted to experience that under some simulated pressure and stress. And I found out that while the Neo mag is great for 80% of what I do and 90% of what I would likely need it for, it's terrible in the context of a competitive shooting. And I could only imagine the conversations that were had behind me as we ran the USPSA match on Saturday. Man, this guy's still trying to get that magazine out of his pocket. Right? Day one, I was wearing shorts because it was like 105 degrees. And I realized that I'm not able to use the Neo mag when I wear shorts. So I had to figure out a different way to carry my backup mag. All of that is to say that as a defensive shooter, everything that I would normally work on a practice session for myself, as far as getting the gun out of the holster, the sights on target, and being able to press the trigger without messing it up quickly, I improved exponentially through this course. And I'm looking forward to training with you some more. That's enough about me. I want to kick it over to Wade and Dr. Solomon, who are both competitive shooters. Wade is an A-class shooter within USPSA. Dr. Solomon is a 3-gun shooter. Do you want me to call you? I don't know, right? I don't know. Is it Dr. Solomon Drew or something else? You have something else I want to call you?
Yeah, don't call me Dr. Solomon.
Don't call me Dr. Solomon. Well,
just call me Drew.
Right. Use your deep Barry White voice on it.
All right. So Drew, talk to us a little bit about your shooting experience, your competitive shooting experience, and why you signed up to take this class with Tim Herron.
I don't know why I wanted to do 3-gun, but when I was in college, I was like, this looks really cool. I want to do it. I got out of college. I met a guy named Chris Taylor at a party, and he told me that he did some 3-gun. He was like, hey, you should come do this thing called USPSA with me. And I was like, okay. So I went, and I couldn't even believe how fast people could shoot. I thought I was like pretty decent at that point. I was just like, wow, I am the worst person here for sure. And I think most of the people on the squad were open shooters. So they were like even faster than usual. It was just crazy. So I thought it was really fun. I shot a few USPSA matches and finally got the 3-gun shotgun and decided to hop over there and do 3-gun. So I've been doing that for about not quite 2 years now.
That's awesome. I have delusions of grandeur because I was like, man, I'm going to do well in this. I'm going to do well in my first USPSA match. I'm going to do well in class. And man, I stunk it up. I listened to some other people run Tim ran a stage and you guys ran a stage. And I was like, that's not bad. You know what I mean? I'm probably going to be 5, 10, 15 seconds slower. And I'm pretty sure I doubled up sometimes on most of the dang runs. Wade, talk to us a little bit about your competitive shooting experience. When did you start shooting competitively, and why did you sign up to take this class with Tim?
Yeah, I started shooting competitively in, I guess, the end of 2016, kind of about 3 years ago. And I had grown up. I got out my first handgun when I was 15 and started shooting, and was never really a rifle shooter. I was always kind of more into shooting pistol. I thought it was a better self-defense platform for me at that time in my life. But, never had done any competitive shooting. I thought, it was just too expensive for me at that time in my life. I couldn't afford to go. But now that got a little bit older and I had just moved back to New Mexico in 2015, my brother and I had started shooting again out at Zia, local range. And they have a little action pistol match out there every other Saturday, which is a ton of fun and it's free. And we were like, let's just go try it, and so I showed up to my first match. I had a Kimber 1911 that I had bought when I was 15. And I'd gone and bought my first holster for the gun, which was an Uncle Mike's. And I had gotten the last 3 Chip McCormick 10-round mags that you could get at the local gun store. And so I had those 3 mags plus a couple of other, 7 and 8 rounders. And I shot my first match, and it was a ton of fun. I was thinking about it the other day, and I remember the first stage I think I had to shoot a Texas Star on. My first USP, action pistol type match ever, and I have to shoot a Texas Star. And I'm like, I didn't bring enough mags. There's just no way. I'm going to need like 70 rounds on this thing. It's 5 shots. So I remember, I show up and they make you announce if you're a new shooter. So I have to raise my hand. Yeah, I've never shot competitively. So they give you a buddy. And so me and my brother and this buddy are all talking. And he's really nervous with me. He's like, man, you've never shot before. It's like, don't run. Don't try to do any hot shot stuff. You're going to see guys that are fast out here. Don't do that. Just be slow and safe, and you'll have a ton of fun. I was like, all right, cool, I can do that. And so I get up to the line, and I make ready, and I holster the gun in my fancy new Uncle Mike's. And, man, I ripped it. I actually did pretty good. I was like, this is just too much damn fun. I was like, it's the most fun you can have with your pants on. And I remember at the end of the match, my brother was like, dude, you really rocked it. And I was like, nah, I mean, these guys are killing it, right? They're like some pretty good shooters there, to be honest. And I ended up coming in 5th overall. And so for me, that was like hook, line, and sinker, man. I was done. I was like, I'm a competitive shooter, baby. And then I spent the next like 3 years realizing how bad I actually sucked because there's just so much to the sport, like pretty straightforward stand and shoot stuff I was okay at. But when you have to add in actual movement and figure out how to get into position, get your gun up, when to hit your reloads, how to break down a stage, how to transition through targets, efficiently, all that stuff is just time on the clock if you don't know how to do it right. And so for me, I've been shooting for, now a couple years. I've moved up to A class, which, A class is a most decent, shooters can get to A class. So for me, I'm like, okay, that's a good spot, but I really want to push through. My goal is to try and hit GM. The amount of effort that it takes and the amount of commitment is tremendous. I've heard a lot of people talk about that, just the breakthrough that it takes to get there. But, guys like Tim who can help diagnose the problems that you're having and figure out how to improve. And, hey, I see you consistently doing this when you're coming into a shooting position, or I consistently seeing you try to do this in the match, and figure out sometimes it's the most basic thing that you're missing that adds the most time to a stage, and you keep doing it over and over again, like your transitions or something like that. So for me, that was the reason I took the class. I think being an electrical engineer, I trained myself to read books and think I can, apply that math to a problem, which is true. But I thought that I could take that same logic from competitive shooting of, well, I can just read so-and-so's book and then I can know how to do reloads, or I can know how to break down stages. But until you see a GM actually hit a reload or see a GM actually show you how to break down a stage, you don't have any concept for what it really truly looks like. And so for me, that was the biggest motivator for doing these classes, kind of getting to see Tim show us, like slap us around like a bunch of kids, like, God, you're an idiot. This is what you're doing wrong. I have a lot to learn. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've shot a few matches out at Zia, kind of got the competitive bug, but for me, I don't think Zia was really competitive enough for me to kind of lure me into that. That after Saturday's match and Sunday's class, I've been talking to Tim past couple days. I was like, hey man, I'm running the Glock 48. I know that's probably one of the worst guns that I can run in competitive shooting, but I'm just going to use it to set a baseline and see my improvement until I can feel comfortable enough to be an adult and get an open gun or a real gun. But I'm like, man, I'm going to run carry optics with the Glock 48. And then I was talking to Tim. I was like, man, it's not on the production list. And he's like, don't even worry about it at local matches. So I'm committed to doing that. I got an optic coming in for it. I'm going to get a couple extra mags and some big boy mag pouches. That's enough about my gear. Wade, talk to us about the gear that you run during a match and the gear that you ran in class.
Yeah, gear is really important, I think, for a lot of people. It's I think you're doing it the right way by just bring what you got and shoot the match. That's the right way to start. And the reason I like that is because you're gonna evolve as you start competitively shooting. You're gonna figure out, hey, there's this. I think this gun fits my hand better. I think, I really want to run high cap, or I really like a dot, and so I want a dot and a compensator. So that kind of helps funnel you into the right division that you want to shoot. I shoot 2011 with iron sights, so I shoot in limited division. And the nice thing about that is it's about as modified as you can get with a gun, except for a compensator and a red dot. In terms of the belt I run, I've got a double alpha belt. It's just a standard competition style belt. I run double alpha mag pouches. I like those because they allow you to articulate the angle of the magazine so that whenever you're reaching for it, it's always right where you want it. And then I've switched over recently. I used to run a Safariland race holster that I really liked, but I felt like I'd seen too many people drop their guns trying to do a quick start from a position where they were running, and the gun pops out and they get DQ'd for that in a match. So I went to a Kydex and I started running the Red Hill Tactical, which I'm actually really enjoying. It's a nice holster.
I've heard good things about Red Hill. So I'm going to run it like I carry. So I'll run appendix, and then I'll get a little bit better, and I'll probably run from an outside the waistband holster, and then graduate up. Wade, what were you running? What do you run during your 3-gun matches as far as your pistol? And then what did you run during class?
So, or you mean Drew?
Drew. Yeah. Sorry. One of these days I'll be a good podcaster.
No worries. The pistol I shoot is a STI Edge 2011 in 9mm. I shoot that in 3-gun. I shoot a Breda B12i semi-auto. It's just a 12 gauge shotgun, and then I shoot a kind of like a Franken rifle AR-15 that has a match barrel, match trigger, nice Vortex scope on it, and that's about it. Bunch of quad loading caddies, and that's it pretty much. I used to shoot a Glock 34, and I did a little bit of production in USPSA. I still really like that gun, and if I do more USPSA, I'll probably shoot production with that gun because it's more like the gun I carry.
Nice. Tim, talk to us about the gear that you run, and then what's the minimum require after you do that, after you run us through your gear loadout, what's the minimum equipment that a student needs to show up with for class?
Well, I started shooting when I began shooting competition, kind of like Wade. I started with a Kimber Custom 2. It was like a $650, 1911. That, I'd heard good things about 1911s and all that kind of stuff. So I bought that, and I shot that gun all the way through like 2013 when I made master with that pistol. And I'll never sell that gun. It's just got a little bit of sentimental value to me. It's still sitting in the safe right now. But then I kind of graduated onto a SIG 1911, and I actually shot for Sig Sauer as a competitive sponsored shooter with them for a couple of years, and then moved on from those into kind of full house custom 1911s. First with Atlas Gunworks for 2.5 seasons, and now with Nighthawk custom guns. Nighthawk's out of Berryville, Arkansas, and built some of the finest custom 1911s you can put your hands on. But I've kind of primarily always stuck with the 1911 platform. So I'm kind of old and set in my ways. I guess you could call me an old soul. Everybody's what talks about like 1911s. You're not old. You're not 90 to be able to shoot one of those things. But I shoot a 1911 and 45. It's what I shoot with. It's what I teach with. It's what I compete with. I carry. For carry and defensive purposes, I have a Glock 48 and or a J-frame, a Smith & Wesson J-frame, 5-shot revolver that I've fallen in love with both of those guns as well. So, and train a lot in the off season with both of those guns. But no, I mean, I carry the gun, the 1911 and 6 magazines on a like a Blade Tech belt with a Red Hill tactical holster. And the pouches I use are just kind of standard Blade Tech, kind of run of the mill standard Blade Tech mag pouches with what they call their competition cut on them. And they're just what I've had for basically since I started shooting competitively, and they work. They don't seem to slow me down. So just, it kind of, I'm not one of those guys that kind of chases the latest and greatest in gear and stuff like that. It's like once I kind of settle on stuff that I know that works and works for me, it's I want to perfect myself and my technique with that gear as best I can. The main thing with the gear is the gun's got to run, the magazines need to feed, and, and the mag pouches need to hold them properly, and not too loose, not too tight, and a holster, I want a smooth draw and I want it to retain the gun when I'm moving. Other than that, minimal requirement for a class. Honestly, you kind of shot really the minimum needed, and I tell students this all the time. I'd like to see you with at least 4 10-round magazines to be able to shoot basically a 32-round USPSA style, practical shooting style stage that will not only use as more of an assessment tool than anything else. We do spend a lot of time, throughout the day kind of breaking down segments of that stage is to find efficiencies. How do we get our footwork? How do we position our bodies better to see targets or to present ourselves to targets better so that we can effectively shoot faster and more efficiently, and that's really what the stage is all about. It's not necessarily about like, how do we shoot this particular stage as fast as we can, like from a competitive aspect. And yes, from a competitive aspect, that is what we do. But even from a defensive aspect, like how do I position myself around walls or barricades? How do I enter through doors? How do I shoot around, oddball positions, hard leans left, hard leans right, kneeling, getting through, like shooting through a port or a window, like how do I have the gun up ready to effectively put hits on a target, whether that be a cardboard USPSA target or whether that could, be then, parlayed into the context of a defensive shooter. Like, how do I put effective hits on a bad person ready to do, inflict damage on me or my loved ones sooner than he can, So I think there's a lot of context that, unfortunately, kind of you were talking about a little bit before, like disparity between defensive world and competitive world, that I really have built this course and curriculum to remove that disparity, so that defensive shooters can see that, like, see, it's fun to run around with your hair on fire and shoot targets fast and, shoot activator targets, and understand that within context, this is great practice and great test of your abilities to make you a better, not a competitive shooter, but to make you a better practical shooter, and utilizing the term practical shooting in the most simplest context of the term, a practical shooter. Everything you do on a defensive stage or in a defensive realm is practical shooting, and that's what this course is built around, is making everybody just a better gun handler, a better shooter. Like I said, you came with basically the required amount of equipment. At no point in time, even as an instructor, watching you as a student, did I feel like Jeremy is undergunned here. Like he's either shooting more gun than he can handle, or he's not shooting enough gun for the context of what he wanted to get or derive out of the class setting. At no point in time did I feel like, man, he's only got 4 magazines, he's going to have to reload more than somebody else. Like when we're shooting some fundamental drills and exercises, nor did I feel like, man, he's outgunned himself, or doesn't have enough equipment to even be able to get himself through a 32-round, course of fire. So, I tell students all the time, really the course doesn't require anything more than a gun, a holster, a means of being able to kind of hold, in your experience, 2 to 3 magazines in a pouch and maybe 1 in the pocket, but 4 magazines to be able to complete a 32-round course of fire. Most anybody that purchases a gun generally buys 2 or 3 extra magazines for that gun, even when they just go and spend a day on the range or even go to an indoor, range and shoot in a lane. Even most guns that you purchase brand new come with at least 3 magazines with them. So, I try to build the course curriculum about, from the most basic standpoint, fundamentally, do you have a gun? Does it work? Do you have a means of being able to carry that gun on your person? And do you have a means of holding at least 3 to 4 magazines? If you got that, you've definitely got enough equipment to take the course.
That's awesome. One of the things that, for me, I felt like just when we were running the stage, even Saturday for the stage, if I would have had like an extra 2 mags, it would have cleared up a lot of my mental processing capability, because I was running the stage and I was like, I have to hit this steel. If I take a makeup shot on it, there goes everything else. I'm going to have to hit this reload, right? It's going to be a standing reload instead of like you talked about, where I can absorb that reload on the move. So for me, it's I wish. Actually, I don't wish the next class that I take with you, I'm going to have a couple extra mags, and I'm going to have some 15 round mags in there. One of the things that you hit on was stage running. And I want to get Drew's perspective on the class breakout and talk to us a little bit about what the first part of Sunday looked like for you as a student.
So the first part was when we ran the stage, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you're talking about?
Yeah, when we ran the stage.
So I think Tim gives us a lot of stuff to think about while we're running the stages. So I can only think of one, maybe two things at a time. And I just had a harder time running it than I think I did the day before, just because I was trying to think of all the stuff. I think that I probably executed certain things better because of what we had talked about. But, overall, I was just like overthinking certain things. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah. So we start off with the stage run on day one, which is the second stage that we ran on Saturday, I think it was.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, second stage that we ran on Saturday. So we got out there. Thankfully, we didn't have to set up that stage. The worst part about this class was breaking down that stage at the end of the class. And the most disappointing part is that I was like, man, I really wish I could run this like this weekend. And when I go out to Zia, I really want to run that stage again just to get some more reps on it, because I think the two reshoots that I had on it, and then throughout the class, we shot portions of that stage again. But wait, talk to us a little bit about that. Talk to us about how Tim took that stage that we ran on Saturday, and then we set a baseline for ourselves on with that initial stage run, and then again on Sunday morning. Talk to us about Tim's instruction style and how he utilized that course and breaking it down for us as students.
Hey guys, I don't know. My connection was a little bad. Who was that question directed towards?
That was for you, Wade.
Okay, what was the question again? Sorry, man.
Just break down Tim's instruction style with utilizing that stage and what he did for yourself and the other students, really breaking down the key components of that stage, and how he went about improving your abilities with that.
So with competitive shooting, the thing I've kind of learned is that there's so many facets to it that it's just a building process. And so in any one stage, whether it was the one we shot or with Tim or any other stage, there's always going to be a few fundamental things that you have to do. But aside from that, there's a lot of other ways that you can figure out how to save time through just efficiency. And what I liked about Tim's approach is that he gave us enough rope to hang ourselves in the beginning. He lets you run it however you want. He makes you plan it out like you would, which is the right way to do it, because you're going to come at this with your own thoughts and your own experiences and say, I know I can do this, and I'm going to do it this way. And then he shows you, a better way to do it. Not maybe, it's his way that helps you to see, hey, if I would have thought of that detail, would have saved me some time. And so what I liked about it is that he watches you run it and he takes notes. And then after you've run it once, he breaks down through the stage. Here's this piece of it, and here's the next piece of it, and then the third piece and the fourth piece. And he just keeps going into small consumable size bites that you can actually start to absorb pieces of it. What I found was that, like Drew said, I can only think of one thing at a time, kind of. And so he would let you run it once to the first little section. Then he'd drag you back and be like, all right, you did this. Now you need to fix that by doing it this way. And then you do it again and do it again. And you kind of like you're polishing the edge on your shooting ability and applying the tips he's given you, so that by the time you run the whole stage, you've walked through and shot everything a few times, but you've figured out the right way to do it, so that whenever you shoot it the last time, the thing that he said that stuck with me was, you're just going to flow through the stage. It's not going to be this run over here, stop, pull the gun up, shoot some targets, then run over here, stop, pull the gun up, shoot some targets. It's actually a lot more planned out, flowing from point A to point B to point C, hitting your reloads and doing it in a timely and efficient manner.
Yeah, it was. So when we showed up and we're setting up that stage on Saturday, and when we're running it on Sunday, one of the things that I was like, man, this is a pretty, not intense stage, but for somebody who shot my first USPSA match, I feel like it probably had most of the components of a stage that you would expect to see in a wide variety of courses. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely.
So Tim, talk to us, for our listeners, kind of explain your stage and the thought process in setting it up, and why you have students run it at the beginning of the class and again at the end.
Well, I think about stages that I've shot that, like across the country, that I've shot at major matches and things like that, that I like, the things that I prefer. But as from a teaching standpoint, like what are the things that I see that tends to be what hinders most people, as far as their progress as a shooter. Most people see really close targets and they think like, I can disregard sight pictures and shoot those just really, really fast and watch holes appear in targets. So that's why, there tends to be one array that typically is, very 3 to 4 yards, kind of open targets, maybe with a no shoot target kind of stapled up someplace to visually pull you into thinking you've got to be a little more careful on something than maybe you do have to. The stages, the things I think about that also are important is movement into and out of a position. Maybe being able to move through a position efficiently, shooting things as you see them versus, and kind of almost shooting things reactively versus, like your test of ability to shoot things proactively. Like having a plan and being able to stick to a plan versus like almost getting into the mindset of like, oh crap, there's a target. I just need to shoot that right there. And even though, okay, it may make sense to shoot it right there, it might've made more sense to position yourself better to engage not only that target, but other targets as well, from one efficient means versus like having to shuffle your feet or move yourself around. I also think it's important to, like, I want to be able to assess the student's ability to not only move laterally left to right, but also downrange moving forward, as well as being able to move uprange safely and effectively with a gun in the hand too, and so we test that ability as well. So you'll kind of notice that particular stage I had set up in that bay, had you, no matter which direction you decided to go first, had you kind of doing some backing up with the gun, as well as kind of moving downrange with the gun, as well as moving a little left, a little right, some hard left leans, some hard right leans. There was a window or port to shoot through. Again, kind of using that as an assessment. Do people crowd walls and crowd barricades when they don't need to? Can they use spatial awareness or use distance to their advantage, not only from an efficiency sake in a competitive shooting realm, but also in a defensive realm, being able to utilize cover effectively, or be able to utilize, placing cover between you and an assailant. Like all of these things I've really thought out to try to make it the most effective class I possibly can make for a practical shooter, but thought of, from the context of a guy that started out in competitive shooting, and being able to utilize a competitive shooter's take on how to become a better practical shooter. So yeah, I've got, kind of in my off season, November, December, January, when I'm not doing a whole lot of like competitive shooting myself, as we all kind of know the season kind of takes a lull. That's the time for me to, like, I'll sit at the computer. I've got a couple of notepads and pens I keep literally with me everywhere, and I take notes. Like, what are some of the things I'd like to see improvements for next season? What are some things that I'd love to see students really be able to work on? So, this class, as I think a good teacher should do, is always building upon their curriculum. And, again, just as I try to polish the edges on the shooter, to make each shooter and student better, I'm constantly trying to polish the edges on myself and my curriculum as a teacher to ensure that I'm building the best product possible, for your guys' sake. So yeah, I'm constantly thinking of different stages I'd like to see, or different scenarios to put you guys under that I can use not only as assessment tools to see or to find or exploit weaknesses or strengths in you guys, but also to bring about those exploitations, and let's fix them. Let's find ways to make you better in a completely different, facet. So yeah, I mean, it's not like I just thought like, oh, cool, this stage would be fun to like teach a class on and throw it together and like hope and pray. I mean, there's definitely some methods to my madness, and how I think things through, and then how I built the course curriculum to kind of like we shoot the stage, together as a squad basically. And I'm always kind of taking this assessment individually of each shooter, their strengths, their weaknesses, so that I can individualize the instruction to that particular student. But at the same time, we start from bare basics. Let's work on fundamentals. The fundamentals of accuracy and marksmanship to, okay, how do we start building blocks? Like I think about it as like a kid dumping Legos on the floor, and it's like you start with one block and then we build, the next thing we've built something that makes sense to our imaginations or whatever. And it's kind of the same thing. It's like, I'm taking all of your skills and I'm kind of dumping them out there on the range and saying, okay, cool. We're going to, to make a better Jeremy, we're going to take a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And we're going to put those two together. And then once we perfect those, we're going to take a little more of this and a whole lot more of this. And we're going to build those two things together and make you more effective on 5 things now instead of just 1 or 2, and trying to find where we can really polish the edges on every single shooter. So, and I do that individually to you. I do it individually to Drew. I do it individually to Wade. We had a couple other students in the class, and that's, to me, I think that's key. I don't want to just be a drill leader. I don't want to just throw a bunch of drills out on the range and say, okay, guys, we're going to shoot 1,000 rounds today, and we're going to do these 8 drills, and you're just going to shoot them until your hands bleed. I don't really think that's conducive to really learning, like as adults learn. So I think there needs to be a lot of hands-on. There needs to be a lot of like getting you guys involved in other aspects besides just pulling the trigger. Having you guys diagnose each other and like calling in plot drills and things like that. Like having you guys help each other. That it's giving you, an alternative to just trying to diagnose yourself, but like letting you be able to see things third person, in somebody else and say, oh my God, I know what he's talking about now because I see it in that guy, or, oh, I see how he corrected that guy. Now it makes sense how, I can fix it for myself, So at the end of the class, I don't just want to make you better shooters. I want to make you better, like diagnosticians for yourselves,
Yeah. So I've taken classes before where it is a drill. You're being led through some drills, and to kind of combat that, I told myself, I have to be able to self-diagnose my shooting inefficiencies, and I thought I was pretty good at that until we went through your shot calling drill, which was something that I've heard about and from some of your former students, and one of the things that I was looking forward to being able to kind of hone in and prove and honestly get that skill that I thought I had that I obviously didn't. But Wade and Drew, whoever wants to go first, talk to us about that shot calling drill and what it's done for you guys.
So I felt like the first time, let me see if okay, sorry. When Tim first taught us the shot calling drill, I was like, I can't do this. I'm not seeing it at all. And I think by the end of it, I was starting to pick it up a little bit. But whenever we started to run the stages again, I started to just be able to see more than I had before and look for kind of different things. And I still suck at it. Like I'm terrible at it, but I'm taking baby steps and kind of know what to look for. And I've noticed like that I have done that a little bit in the past. Like when I'm, trying to blaze down a stage. Oh yeah, I wasn't on that target. I'm going to go back for it. And it's just, I don't know. He just kind of put it in a way that made made a lot of sense to me. So, and I think that that's one of the things that's really great about Tim is I've taught a lot of classes professionally and in church, and I've taken a lot of classes from teachers, good and bad. And Tim is 100% a natural teacher. He teaches things very clearly. He breaks them down in a way that I think is pretty easy to understand. And he just picks up on little things that make a huge difference in your shooting. So that was one of the things that I really liked about Tim's teaching style. It just works for me. I can only think of one or two things at a time, and he knows that. So he's got it.
That's awesome. Wade, what about you? What were your thoughts on the shot calling drill?
So yeah, the shot calling drill is actually a really amazing drill to work on. And I had never done it before, so it was my first time. I've heard a lot of people talk about calling shots, and I've been shooting enough now to where I can start to kind of get a sense of whenever I have a good shot or a bad shot. And when it's just on the edge or when it's actually off paper or hit a no shoot or something like that. But so I've always kind of had to do that self-diagnosing real time when I'm shooting or in my practice, but I've never had it done in slow fire where you know exactly what the sights look like. When you break the shot, you put your head down and have to think about it and say, okay, that was here based on where I saw the sights. I've never done it that way, and it makes the most sense, I think. To Drew's point, not trying to suck up to Tim or anything, but he is a natural instructor. I'd say the thing he does really well, like there's a lot of people out there that can do stuff. They're phenomenal athletes. They don't really even know why they can do what they do. But Tim has figured out how to do the things that he does, and through his own self-taught and through the classes he's taken, he's figured out how to provide an instruction to other people that allows you to do the same thing. So, yeah, it's to me that's what makes him such an awesome instructor is his ability to figure out not only how to tell you what you're doing wrong, but how to communicate it effectively so that you can learn from it and grow from it.
Yeah, I would agree. That's I heard that coming into this class, and that's one of the reasons that. So I'm an instructor. Deal primarily with defense. Well, completely with defensive shooting, and I feel like at times I have used the excuse. Well, it's good enough, right? Like defensive accuracy. It's good enough. I feel like I've used that as a crutch in my own shooting abilities. So one of the instructors, I've committed to training more, but one of the requirement for that is I am only going to train with instructors that I know take that high level approach with their students, and that they have a proven track record where they're able to. Tim had an unclassified guy running a Glock 48 in class. He had an A class shooter, a B class shooter. Drew said he was unclassified, and I'd imagine that's only because he hasn't shot enough USPSA matches. And based on his abilities, I would put him right up there with the other students in class. And he literally shaved off damn near, like cut my stage run time in half. And when I was running the stage the first time, I didn't feel like I was doing it slow. I knew I was giving up time here and there. But when I heard the time read off, I was like, wow, that was very, very slow. Like terribly slow. Like,
hey, Jeremy, I got a question for you, man. Given that this is your first time shooting USPSA and your first time taking this kind of a class, how did you feel the pressure stacked up on you when you were at the line? Did you feel a lot of pressure, or did you feel totally like this is easy, no big deal?
So during the stage or during the match on Saturday, I didn't really feel the pressure. And I think that's because I gave myself the cop out that I'm running it from my carry gear. And I feel like that allowed me to run the stages in my element, if that makes sense. I didn't go all out. I didn't try to burn it down. I felt like I performed below my ability. And then after taking the class, I felt like I performed well below my ability. In class, I had some self-induced pressure because I didn't want to be the guy that was holding up class, right? I didn't want to be the, hey, I'm a defensive shooting guy. I didn't want to be, holding up the class. I was running 10-round mags. So I was making sure that I was, stuffing mags when Tim was coaching me. And then when we shot some of the drills side by side, I felt the pressure. I felt myself trying to keep up with you, with you guys. And I had a conversation with Brandon. I was like, I just got to get out of my own head. I ran one more drill, and I think that was enough for me to get enough out of my head to where I was competing against myself, if that makes sense. But I completely believe that's, the company of the class allowed me to kind of work through that nonsense in a relatively short manner of time where, I wasn't feeling that pressure all class. And I can imagine if I had taken a class with some jerks, it would have been a different story, but you guys were awesome.
I asked the question because I noticed when you first shot, you were really struggling with accuracy, and you were kind of seemed like you were nervous a little bit.
Yeah.
But then by the end of it, man, you were a rock star. 1 for 1 on steel. You're running and gunning, no problem at all. And I was like, he's getting comfortable. Because and the reason I was kind of asking is because I feel like when I got into competitive shooting, part of why I wanted to do it so I could learn how to be a better defensive shooter. And I was trying to figure out if you felt like that pressure in any way simulated a real world situation that maybe would, it's not nobody shooting at you, but it's induced pressure. That timer makes you really want to go fast and want to do what you have to do to get the hits, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't know if maybe that had any impact on how you were feeling in the moment.
I don't know if I've experienced that. I'm sure I have sometimes, but I really think so. I'm super analytical of myself, right? Almost to a point that it's a detriment. And this is one of the few times that I've been in a classroom setting. I hate being the newest or the worst at something, right? I hate it. It terrifies me.
Class, by the way, we're all a bunch of alpha males.
I was gonna say, what? You are not alone in that endeavor, Jeremy. I mean, the fact that you were with 5 other students in this class that all have that exact same anxiety.
Well, thankfully, hopefully they had somebody that was a way worse shooter than them. For me, part of the other thing is I don't use my sights. And again, that's because 3 to 7 yards, I'm good enough without my sights. And one of the things for the past 18 months or so, I've talked with some of our other instructors and shooting the New Mexico qualification course, not to get too far down a rabbit hole, is, I've shot like an action pistol match before. And in this class, there were situations where I needed to use my sights, but my brain wasn't turning it on quick enough. So I just sent them. And I was like, well, that's good enough. And that was a delta, or, that's why I was throwing, or that's why I had some misses on there. So I haven't used my sights on the final stage run. I used them some. I didn't use them enough. And that's part of the reason that I'm going to go to a dot, not because I want the equipment to make me a better shooter, but I feel like my learning curve it'll be steep, but it'll be quicker working on acquiring that dot. I might be completely wrong. I know a lot of people say 6 months or whatever, but I'm committed to dry fire. And I feel like for my just mental limitations, this is what almost full time. We're on the range 2 or 3 times a year, and 98% of my shooting is defensive shooting, where I can not use my sights and still look good, right? But that, not to get further off on my defensive shooting tangent, but yeah, normally I would have been like shitting bricks and everything else. But
here's a great question, I think, to ask you, because you come from a defensive background, right? And we've all heard, I'm sure you've heard it even more than I have, in a defensive situation, when you have to use, judicial use of your gun is needed in a defensive situation, those bumpy things on the top of the slide never even come into view. You can't see them fast enough to make split decisions under stress or duress. Okay, we've all heard that, right? Like, the typical defensive encounter, 5 to 7 yards or whatever, cops or somebody defending their own life doesn't even see the sights or use the sights. sights slow you down. Like that always tends to be people's crutch is like, oh, if I have to aim, then I'm going to shoot slower than if I point shot or if I did anything else. And I think my counter to that is watching you shoot, not using your sights almost at all, exclusively the first stage, and you shot it in 30 some odd to 40 some odd seconds. Your last stage, you shot sub 30 seconds, utilizing your sights. You shot faster, you shot more accurate, and you shot utilizing much more information at your disposal to make better decisions, as I say in class, making better decisions behind the gun.
I would,
I mean,
the way that
did you feel like aiming is slowing me down here?
Aiming wasn't slowing me down there. And part of that is I was able to see all these other things that I was slowing myself down, right? And you talk about do the non-shooting stuff faster, and that's where you save your time. Right. I think where people get like aiming slows you down, aiming will slow you down if you don't train with your sights. Like if you allow yourself, and that's for the longest time I allowed myself to be good enough within 3 to 7 yards with the flashlight picture and not lining it up, that now when I need them, I can't use them, right? In a defensive shooting situation, if you need your sights, or if you don't need your sights, but you can use them, you're fine, right? But if you need your sights and you can't use them, well, then you're screwed. So that's there's just so many myths within the training world and preconceived notions that people have with regards to training and competitive shooting. And on kind of in that vein, I'd like to get, Wade, let's start with you on this one. What was an obstacle that you wanted to overcome or come away from class with a better understanding on how to train and practice to overcome? What would you say one of your obstacles in the way of going from an A class to Grandmaster?
So I think one of the biggest obstacles I have right now is figuring out how to really get in and out of positions smoothly. And then also, so shooting positions, and then also consistently keeping my splits and transitions smooth and at the right cadence they need to be to hit the shot. So I'm not throwing any Charlies and Deltas and Mikes. So I still think fundamentally just hitting my targets. There's, when I run into a position and I got some steel right there, I'm like, just throw some lead at it, it'll be fine. And it never works out. So figuring out how to pace myself a little bit on those and get the hits, see the minimum target that I need to see to get the hits. That's something that Tim said that really stuck with me. How do you see the minimum amount of target that you need to see to get the hit? And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about shooting fast with your sights. It's not that you're just seeing the top of the gun and this target and you're shooting at it. You have to actually line it up when you're taking a 25-yard plate rack or something like that. So figuring out how to do that, and I think doing it consistently, on demand, never missing. A Grandmaster should be able to do all the fundamental skills 95% of the time or better, right? So if you're going to do a reload, you should make that reload happen in a second time. If you're going to do a draw, it should be a 1 second draw 95% of the time. And so those are the things that are just kind of honing those little features within shooting that I've got to get hammered down, those fundamental skills. Those are the things I think that are not being, I can do it some of the time, about 80%, right? Which is where I'm at in my classification right now. So figuring out how to push through so I can do it 95 to 100% of the time.
Nice. And Drew, what are some skills that you wanted to take away from the class that you were looking forward to improve your 3-gun shooting performance?
So one of the things is pretty much the same as what Wade said, getting into positions ready to shoot and leaving the position quickly. I waste a lot of time just like setting up to make the shot, and Tim really kind of focused on that with that exercise we did kind of around the barrel, moving quickly, hitting the shot on the move and then running to that popper as fast as we could and setting up for a nice shot. He worked with me a lot on that, and also gave me a couple drills that I can do in practice to get better at that. So that was super helpful. Another thing that that I do a lot in 3-gun is like I try to take a really conservative, safe stage plan, and I get a nice conservative, safe placement in the match because of that. And So one thing that he said when we were doing that drill where you had to hit the popper, the thing on the side, and then the swinger at the very end, he said, if you believe you can do it and think positively, you'll be able to do it. And I was like, all right, I'm going to try it. Just went for it, got it the first time. I didn't think I could do it, but
yeah, you smoked that, by the way. I was blown away by how smooth that was. That was awesome. I've been trying to do it the whole day, and you just walked up there and just did it. I was like, did you?
So I think that maybe I'm ready to start being a little bit more aggressive on stages in some ways, at least in the stage plan. And then also, so I think he taught me when I need to be aggressive and when I can be, and then when I need to back off a little bit as well. Because when I go crazy, I go ham, like, and then I can't stop, and then I don't hit anything. So
to add to Drew's comment there that he just made is when we were doing like that specific drill where it was like popper, paper, and then the drop turner. Something that I didn't ever really consider was flowing with your plan and don't stop. If something happens, like you go popper, mic, then hit the paper, and then hit the swinger, and then come back to that popper. That's still faster than going, wait, I missed that popper. I got to go back. Now my stage plan's all messed up. So trying to figure out how to turn that on and off. But that's the stuff that I think, I just never, I don't know why it should have been obvious, right? But I didn't till he like smacked me in the side of the head and was like, stop doing that. I was like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense now.
I agree 100%. And we saw Tim do that the day before in the match. Like, I don't know, there was an array, he kept going and then he went back, and I thought that was super cool.
Yeah.
I don't do that either.
That would have, if I could have, had that locked in for the last match we shot, the New Mexico sectionals, that would have saved me a procedural that I got in one of the stages. It was a balance beam stage. I went popper, paper, and I got an edge hit on the popper so it didn't fall. So I ran my stage. I kept doing it like I was going to, but I hadn't thought through like the what if it doesn't actually fall problem. So whenever I did my stage plan, so when I came back, I just ran back to the box that we started in and took a shot at it and knocked it over. But when I was leaving that box, I looked down and my foot was out of the bounds. So I was like, oh man, I got a 10-point procedural for shooting out of the bounds, figuring out, that's something that's hard to do. Figuring out how to stick to your stage plan, and then having the ability to, in the moment when something goes wrong, stick to your stage plan, but recall a way to clean it up without adding a bunch of time.
Yeah.
I want to talk kind of like a roundtable discussion and kind of kick it off with Tim. Where do you see, kind of in that same vein, where balancing being aggressive but being conservative enough to where you're not going to leave a stage with some mics or some no-shoot mics? How do you find that sweet spot for your students? And then where do you think most newer shooters come into a stage at, if that makes sense?
For me, I think balancing obviously speed with accuracy, is important, right? Everything we do in practical shooting is kind of based on the Latin initials DVC, which is like speed, power, and
Accuracy.
Speed, power, and accuracy, right? So, like all three of those things are important. Like you got to be, so like that's kind of the balance. Is like I want everybody to focus their energy as far as like that. I want to go hair on fire, right? Everybody just wants to draw the gun out of the holster, and they think that the speed is just in simply like, pulling the trigger finger faster, right? I was like, man, if I can just pull the trigger and make the gun go bang faster, then that's going to be, that's how the big boys are doing it, right? So that's what I have to do. And unfortunately, you learn very quickly that no, the big boys aren't doing that. Like very rarely are you seeing grandmasters, national champions, IDPA, masters, the guys that are winning the matches. Very rarely do you see those guys like ripping, fast, super fast, like doubles and splits and double taps and things like that. What you're seeing them do is not waste any energy doing something that's not benefiting them as far as like on the stage, right? Meaning, or within a scenario, meaning like they're not just nonchalantly thinking about reloading, kind of whistling to themselves and putting the holster in the gun and then going, kind of excuse my language, but like ape shit crazy once they get the gun pointed at the targets and they start just blazing away, right? Those guys that are winning matches are the ones that figured out, like, I want you to do all of the non-shooting stuff, right? The draws, the reloads, the running crazy, getting from position to position and setting up. You're doing all that stuff as fast as you possibly can because that's all you have to do. That's your only focus, so that when you get to a position and you've got the gun aimed at a target, and I tell people, like, it's not slow down to get your hits or shoot slower or shoot more carefully. Isn't
it smooth as fast?
It's about when you get to a position ready to shoot, right? You're doing all of that other stuff as fast as you can to allow yourself the time necessary to make good decisions, right? Actively make good decisions. Those good decisions is that, do I have enough of that sight picture to call a shot once I'm pressing the trigger and actively shooting that target? Do I need to aim a little harder at that small piece of steel that's 15 or 20 yards away? Can I get away with shooting a little more aggressively on those 3 open 7-yard targets over there? And those are the decisions that you need to make in the moment behind the gun to shoot smarter. It's not shooting faster, it's shooting smarter. You're doing all the other shit as fast as you possibly can to allow yourself to be smarter when making decisions as you're actively shooting the targets. And I think that's where the biggest, like, those are where the biggest mistakes or the biggest, like, lowest hanging fruit happen to be with shooters, is they tend to try to speed up the stuff that they shouldn't be speeding up, and they don't realize that the stuff they should be speeding up and they're not is where they're losing the biggest amounts of time. Everybody thinks that time is made and just yanking the trigger faster and disregarding the 2 most important things in shooting, which is gripping the gun and managing that sight picture to an acceptable level to get the accuracy that you need. And a lot of people don't put into context, like, oh yeah, when I get to that position, now what? It's like, well, did you get to that position with the gun up aimed earlier so that you could get to work sooner? It's not necessarily like you don't want to get there and then be late and think, oh, I'm going to make up time, and I'm using air quotes there. I'm going to make up time by shooting faster, right? We all know what happens when you start to try to make up time by just pressing the trigger faster. All we end up doing is missing a lot more.
I was blown away by your, barrel drill where we were coming around the corner and we had to do a hard lean on a fault line and the sights are up. And as soon as you see that target, it's like just natural just to start whacking away on it and hitting alphas. And it was amazing to me how much smoother it was, because I always felt like running with your gun up was awkward because you're bouncing your arms trying to get into position. Mm-hmm. But what I found is that you're actually, it like hits the whole body break when your arms are fully extended and you're getting ready to take that shot. And it's so much faster because as soon as the target is available, you start hitting it. And it was something that, like, why didn't I realize that? But had I not taken your class and seen the difference on the timer that it makes, I probably would have never done that by myself in a drill or a practice. And so that's the stuff that these classes, I think, really make a difference. That's why it's worth the money, because I could have gone and spent $1,000 on ammo and I'd have never figured that out. But it's going to save me seconds on every stage that I shoot.
Yeah, and that's kind of that's a great point. It's like, I think everybody there, like, a lot of us are looking for ways where we can, decrease an entire stage, like in a USPSA match by, I'm sure everybody here would have been happy had they found just a second, 1 second on a 25 to 30 second stage, right? But I mean, and think about it just in the context of a competitive shooter, a second can make a huge difference in like your hit factor or like your overall score, and where do we find a second? And a lot of guys think that, like, I'm just going to yank the trigger faster and somehow magically an extra second's just going to lop off my time, and it's just in that one position from start to that very first target. I think everybody there that last Sunday, when we shot just that particular exercise, was able to find in excess of 0.8 of a second overall. Just literally moving about 4 yards to 5 yards, setting up into a position sooner so that you could get to work sooner. Not necessarily nobody was shooting the target faster than they could see, but because they were prepared to shoot the target earlier, they saw huge gains in just their time, just on that one position. And you think about just a 0.6 to 0.8 to a second right there. And then think about how many times did you like stop and start or enter other positions within that stage, where now 1 second has turned into 2 seconds, has turned into 3 seconds, has turned into 4 or 5 seconds by the end of a stage that size, And then thinking about it, like for Jeremy, and then trying to put it in the context of like, what does a second save me in a defensive situation? If I've got the gun aimed earlier, I can do the work sooner. What is a second worth? And that's why I had Jeremy shoot, like, I want you to shoot 6 rounds as fast as you can, just into the berm, and I just had him shoot 6. Where does 0.6 or 0.8 of a savings do? It reduced the amount of return fire, or reduce the amount of time that effectively that somebody's shooting at you or inflicting or trying to inflict damage on you. It reduced 4 shots out of the equation. And thinking about that from like a gunfighting or a self-defense situation, like, do I want to give the bad guy 4 shots at me before I can get my gun out to them? Hell no, And at the same time, it's like, and thinking about that back into a competitive aspect, Wade, do you want to spot me 0.8 on a stage just because out of the goodness of your heart, And that's basically
competition.
Right. But that's basically what you're doing. When you're leaving that kind of time on the ground, you're spotting me that time because I found that time, So and that's in the context of the class, that's what I wanted to teach you guys is, like, stop spotting your opponent time that you should be taking advantage of.
For me, it was 20 seconds, but
no biggie.
Yeah, just a little room of improvement there.
That actually drives home a really good point, Jeremy, is that when is the best time for a competitor or somebody to take a class to learn how to do competitive shooting? In my opinion, is the first time before you go shoot your first match, or maybe you shoot one match and then you go take a class with an instructor so you understand how it actually applies. Because I did the same thing that I think most people do. I'm like, I can read a book. I can figure out what they're teaching me without having to go spend that couple $100 in my whole Saturday. Frankly, you can't. I've come to realize that, nope, I'm a pretty smart guy and I can't figure out how to do that. So the only way you're going to get it is through instruction. And the sooner you get the instruction, I think the bigger the gains will be in the overall career of your shooting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So if I take a defensive handgun course, I'm going there with like a 50-50 mix. I want to learn on how to get better on some things. And then I also I'm really there just to kind of dissect how they run a range and how they teach and how they instruct and kind of really compare it to what I'm doing with our students. With Tim's class and being completely out of my element, I was like, I had no idea what I was doing. I'd have no idea how to communicate this style of instruction to students. So I was really a blank canvas, and I would definitely recommend anybody that is thinking about getting into competitive shooting to take a class, because it will greatly reduce the learning curve that you have. I'm excited to go out there and shoot matches now. I want to shoot some USPSA matches. Really want to go out there and shoot some ZM matches because I feel like the level of competition isn't as great there.
You want to go off and beat up on those guys, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. I want to go beat up on some double-barreled shotgun owners and guys that get mad at Tim for setting up some fun stages.
Take that, Tim.
Yeah. So that's and I was like thinking about like, man, I was looking at the cost like for open guns, and an entry-level open gun is what, around $3,000
at least.
Yeah, that's on a minimum. A solid open gun. Some of the custom open guns could be anywhere between $5,000 to $8,000.
Okay, good. So my Glock 48 is not as close to that as I thought it was.
Tell your wife that. See, honey, I'm running a Glock 48. It is nowhere near as expensive as these open guns. It's taking me all this money.
Meanwhile, the millwork and the optic cost more than the damn gun.
Yep.
And then the brass, the 38 super brass, that's like,
Yeah.
find a few of those and you can retire early.
No, literally, for a gift, I gave Rick Kennedy a bottle of 38 super brass because he's like, I've just found this. It matches when I pick up other people's brass, and you're the only guy I know who shoots open right now. So,
I bet he loved it.
You know, I would say though, like, I would recommend anybody who's new to the sport take some classes before you buy that big gun. Run your Glock 19, your 17, or your M&P, whatever it is you got, because you will get way more improvement out of class instruction and understanding how to break down the match and how to shoot the stage and how to handle that firearm than you will if you are going to go buy that $7,000 open gun with, you know, $1,000 worth of mags.
Sure.
And it really, I mean, it helps show you the limitations of what you're currently running. So for me, with the Glock 48, I was like, just looking at the splits that I was able to put up, like the accurate splits I was able to put up against, you know, the accurate splits that you guys were putting up. I was like, I'm not going to gain it with my current equipment. So stop trying to gain it there. And then, you know, now I'm looking at tungsten guide rods and all this other thing.
You got the plug, man. You got the
I know. And then you guys were having a conversation about, you know, springing your 1911s and, you know, what pound springs you're running them in. And I'm like, man, do they make 13-pound Glock 48 springs? And
I'll tell you, I started down that path. I bought an M&P core. That was my first, you know, competition gun. Because I was like, dude, this is what Jerry Michalik runs. It's bad to the bone. And it did everything you could do to that gun. And it still was not a good gun. Like, just don't do it, man. Like, just don't do it. Just shoot the gun you got. Put, you know, every time. Here's something I told one of my buddies. Is like, dude, every time you think about going and buying a new sweet, you know, like toy for that gun that sucks, go get yourself like that $50 or $100 or $200. Put it in the bank. Don't do crap with it. Just put it in the bank. Next time you get that bug, I need that new optic, or I need that new trigger, I need that new magwell. Go take that money, put it in the bank. And then after you do that for like 10 or 15 times, then you'll have half the cash you need to go buy your 2011, and you'll be like, okay, fine, I'm just going to do that. Because where you're going to get to is you're going to get to a 2011 either way if you get serious with the competition shooting.
Yeah, my Glock 48's getting up there. That's like, and I want to get a robar coating done to it because I don't clean my guns ever. I probably shot, Tim said 600 rounds. I think on the weekend I probably shot close to 800. And I think, I don't know do you guys know how many rounds y'all shot during class?
You know, I
think maybe.
How many?
I think 500 or 600. I didn't even count.
I'm really bad. I reload, and I don't like have those sweet little boxes that you put hundreds in or whatever, so you know how much you shot. I dump them in a old Cascade dishwasher bucket, little Cascade pods. Fit in my range bag, just nice, and I get about, I don't know, 700, 800 rounds in it or whatever. So it's like half full. That's about what I shot. I don't know.
Nice. Yeah, I showed up on Saturday with 600 rounds, and then I had to go buy. I went and bought another 350. Probably because I had a couple big makeup stages during the Saturday run. But I haven't cleaned the gun, and I don't plan on cleaning it.
So, something we haven't talked about here at all that I think is actually really important when it comes to quality of your gun and how well you can shoot it is reloading. I think that factory ammo is a disadvantage in competitive shooting sometimes. I think that if you can reload a load that's tuned for your gun specifically so that it's accurate, gives you the right amount of power factor for the division that you're shooting in, and it will have the minimal amount of recoil so that you can give yourself that little bit of an edge. That will buy you way more performance than going and getting that new, you know, super sleek trigger or whatever else. I started reloading, and I didn't realize, again, going back to my M&P story, I was shooting Freedom munition because it's the dirt cheap ammo that I could get at the time. And I had like 1,000 rounds of Freedom left, and I took it out the other day because I didn't have time to reload. And I was doing like a 2-inch circle at 10 yards, and I had my nephew there, and I was like, just kind of, usually I just eat the center of it, 10 rounds at 10 yards, and I can just put them all into the 2-inch circle. And I could not group at 10 yards with my Atlas, which is a phenomenal gun. And whenever I pulled out I had like 50 or so of my reloads, I went right back to dropping them in. So at 10 yards, I had a group about like that would normally be about like that. Another example, that was a buddy of mine bought a pistol off me. I had won a Springfield XD at a match, and I was like, I don't want this gun. It's like, you want to buy it? And I was like, I'll give you a really good deal on it. And I even got the Springfield Plus Up package, so he got that for free too. But he had never shot it before, so I was like, let's go to the range. And I just had some factory ammo, and I was letting him shoot it. And again, at like 7 yards, he was holding like a 4-inch group, and I was like, man, this guy's just struggling with this gun. And I handed him my my limited gun and was like, let's just see what you can do with this. And he's a big guy with big paws, and man, he blew out the center on a 2-inch circle. And he was like, I want that gun. And I was like, all right, well, that's about 10 times the price of the other gun, so we're gonna have to talk about some money here.
How'd you win the XD, or did you lose the XD? Is that what, did you shoot so bad that's the consolation prize?
Either way, it was a win, right?
Who was giving away an XD?
Here, Wade, go back to an XD because you suck this bad.
You shoot this at the next match and you blame it on the gun.
That's right. Yeah, now you have an excuse. No, it was the Colorado State Championship USPSA match last year, and I definitely didn't win it on my performance. They just had a random gun they did a random drawing on, and there was like 200 shooters or something like that, and I just out of 200 got lucky. I would have given them that gun back for like half those mics back.
Probably from shooting the XDM, right?
Harleys, come on, guys.
Nice. I feel like we always have another hour or two's worth of conversation when we're jumping off of this, but I had a technical difficulty when we started, which put us on a little bit later. But I definitely do want to give you all the rest of the evenings back. But before we do that, Tim, tell our listeners where they can find out about you.
Honestly, best way to find out about me, I got my website at timherronshooting.com. It's very easy. It's got my class curriculum on there. So what classes I offer, what the course descriptions are, round count, equipment needed, all that good stuff. It's also got a bunch of information regarding my like individual private instruction, as well as like small group clinics or group classes that I do as well. And then on that website as well as also got my my calendar of classes that I'm teaching all the way through the end of this year, and I'm pretty booked all the way through the end of June 2020 already. So if you're interested in maybe coming out or contacting me via the email address that's on the website there's also a phone number you can contact me there too, or even through Facebook. Reach out to me. And if you're interested in setting up a class, let's set something up. Like I said, I've still got like 6 months into next year that we can set a class up. It takes about a minimum of, I'd like to see a minimum of 8 students for a 2-day class. We can work within the confines of 6 students for a 1-day class. If something like that, like maybe you're from a small area or only have interest maybe from 6 or 7 guys or gals to take a class with, I'll come out for that as well. But we can, as long as we got a range and, a core group of 8 to 10 students for a 2-day class that are hungry and want to learn and eager, then we can make a class happen. So.
And on that class, I don't think there's a class out there where you will receive the amount of one-on-one instruction that Tim provides in his course. And that's a huge reason why he limits the number of students that are in that class. So don't, if you're thinking about hosting a class, but you don't think you can get to the eight student minimum, but you have you and 5 buddies that, want to come out and take it. It's well worth it. And then for any of the listeners out there that would love to train with Tim, but aren't local to him here in the great state of Albuquerque, or the great state of New Mexico, I'm going to get some Albuquerque education jokes, right? He does online training that in one-on-one sessions with you via Skype. So can give that a consideration. You won't be disappointed in that. And then come in having some reasonable expectations for that. It's not going to be, that's a session. Is it a one training session, or talk about your packages for that really quick? Because
it kind of depends. So yeah, for like the online training stuff, I can offer, we offer it as like either an hourly session. So we could set up to do just a one session. And I've had guys do that. Maybe they're just having some issues with, in their dry fire, or maybe some inefficiencies they see in their draw. Maybe they want to refine their reload technique or something like that. If you've got a computer with a webcam and a means of like either Skype or FaceTime or something like that, man, we can schedule an hour's worth of time and talk it out. I've also offer like 3-month and 6-month packages. Those 3-month or 6-month packages are like actual full training plans. They're not necessarily plans in the realm that like you pay $170 or $300 or $350 or whatever for a 6-month plan. And you get like, okay, Jeremy, I'm going to email you a training plan, that's a stack of like training philosophies and drills to do and things like that. No, I make it, again, just like I do in my classes, I make it as individual as the needs of that student are deemed necessary. So, if I get a master or grandmaster level or an A-class level shooter that says, hey man, I've been doing this for a long time, I can draw 1 second and my reloads are great, but for some reason I'm having issues with movement on this. Okay, great. Send me some videos of, like your most recent practice sessions or match sessions, and I'll go through them. I'll kind of go through some analytics myself and really assess everything, take a lot of notes, and then we'll convene at a time that's convenient for both of us to sit down in front of a computer and talk. And I build a lesson plan or build a practice regimen for that particular student to fix, assess, diagnose, and improve those particular deficiencies. So, and it can move on and on and on, so once we fix a couple of things, great, here's some other things that we're working on. Let's move on to the next session and we're going to do this. So yeah, it's very organic in how it flows and evolves based on each individual's needs. So, I've had some guys that have done a 2-month or 3-month session with me where it literally, all we've done is spent time having heart-to-hearts talking about how to overcome mental stress and nerves and that's what made that shooter better, so that's the great thing, is it's completely individualized to your needs and what I feel would be best suited for you. So it's not just a one size fits all. Hey, let's do this, and here's your prize for your investment. That prize is completely specific to that individual. So, and that is something I offer. It's something I enjoy doing. It's funny. I had expectations of how I wanted that to work, in my mind when I first offered that. And like I said, it's kind of grown and evolved into something completely different that even as a teacher is like, man, it blows my mind. It's like, this is cool that it's gone this direction more so than what I think I really wanted to kind of tie the reins in on it before. And to see the online training really evolve into something completely different and outside the box is awesome, because I think it's something that I don't think many other instructors or teachers even offer, not to this level. So
yeah, it's definitely not, from what I've heard and the conversations that you and I have had about it. It's not a cookie cutter program, right? Like normally the thing with online classes is you pay X amount of dollars and then 2 seconds later, you get an email with the course and the training material. It's not cookie cutter, and you will have to do the work if you want to see that improvement with anything. But it is individualized coaching plan for you. If anybody's on the fence about that, just seek out students of Tim Herron's. You won't find a bad review out there. We haven't heard anything negative about Tim, and it's the rave reviews that he gets, which is a big reason why we wanted to host him here in Albuquerque, where I wanted to train with him. And then reach out to him, timherronshooting.com. Use Tim Herron on Facebook and all the Tim Herron Shooting on the gram. If you do the gram.
Yep.
We definitely appreciate you guys hanging out with us a little bit later than what we normally do. And we will see y'all next week. Remember, it's your life. It's your safety and protection. It's your responsibility. Y'all stay safe.